Salamanders are so special because they're these unique hidden jewels that occupy every single niche throughout the Appalachian region, and many people don't even realize that they're here. Yet they're one of the most biologically distinctive treasures that we actually have in the whole North American continent. I grew up in Africa reading books about these incredible salamanders in North America, in the Appalachian region, much the same way the kids would be reading about lions and elephants in the savannas. I think that a lot of people here, because they've grown up with these right on their doorstep, they don't realize the incredible treasures they do have access to in their own backyards.
North America has the highest phylogenetic diversity of salamanders in the world, and this Appalachian Mountain region is home to about half of the species in the US. They all occur right here in this small area. There is an amazing diversity of salamanders in the Appalachian region. There are species like the redback, which are very widely distributed, very abundant. And then there are species like the hellbender that are fully aquatic and live at the bottom of these very cold, fast-flowing streams.
Most of the fresh water in the eastern United States sits in tiny little streams, maybe as wide as your feet, or it's not sitting in big rivers. It's sitting in tiny little streams, but there's so many of those streams across the mountainous and hilly landscapes of the eastern U.S. So, and in those streams, they're so small and so shallow, and they dry up from time to time, that there's no fish in there. We don't find turtles. We don't have any turtles that live in there. We don't have any frog species. The vertebrate animal in that ecosystem are salamanders. They're the vertebrates that matter to our freshwater ecosystems.
Salamanders are very elusive animals, and most of them live underground, at least here in our part of the world. And the spotted salamander, for instance, it lives underground in the soil. It's a fossorial animal. And it only emerges above ground once a year. That's the time when it reproduces. So it does that in the dark, in the rain, in the forest, and it migrates under this cloak of secrecy to get to the vernal pool, the natal pond that it came from. And so unless someone were in the right place at the right time to see this phenomenon, they would never know this animal exists.
We can see on the landscape unequivocally that humans are doing things that drive populations, at least locally, down. We're increasing the amount of land we're converting over to residential areas. All of those cars driving in those areas are dumping large amounts of pollution on those hilltops. And all of those people running around are planting gardens and moving organisms around, which is introducing new things to the surrounding forest landscape. And then all of that plays out against a backdrop of climate change.
Well, mountaintop removal is just exactly what it implies. Mining companies in Appalachia have resorted to going to the tops of the mountains, and they first take bulldozers, they shove all vegetation and trees down the mountain into huge piles, and they burn them with diesel fuel and old tires and whatnot. They get rid of all the vegetation, they strip the mountain of vegetation. Then they drill a series of holes. They stuff those with ammonium nitrate and diesel fuel. They detonate that, and they blow the mountain up. And then they take everything that isn't coal and they dump it over in the valleys, covering the valley streams. They destroy an entire mountain for small amounts of coal. And in that process, they're poisoning the headwater source streams of Appalachia, which incidentally are the headwater source streams of a lot of drinking water for the mid-Atlantic and deep south. We're destroying our water. And those telltale signs that there's something wrong take place at the headwater source streams to begin with. And for instance, with the salamander, which breathes through its skin, if the salamander's not surviving, and it's at the most pristine beginning spot of where we all get our water from, and we see the salamander dying out because of the water quality, what does that tell us? It tells us we have a serious problem and we need to address it very quickly.
What do we want? We need water! What do we want it? Now! What do we want? We need water! What do we want it? Now!
When you think about it, when you think about for the number of years that we've known that we've been losing salamanders, if we would have paid attention to that 5 years ago and addressed that and recognized that something's wrong here, perhaps we wouldn't have so many human beings dying today below these mountaintop removal sites.
Salamanders are kind of interesting, particularly these lungless salamanders in Appalachia, because 100% of the gas exchange is through the skin. They have no lungs. And yet they manage to walk around in forests where there's bacteria and fungi, some nasty fungi that is really good at killing living things. And then you realize that they're not covered in sores and blisters. They kind of have like a living kind of petri dish on their skin of things. And we haven't even begun to understand how they do that. Yet they exist in a way in which they have figured out, or they've evolved a mechanism for living with very vulnerable tissues, perfectly functioning in the forest. And I think that we have a lot to learn from them in terms of how they accomplish that. And I'm quite confident that we would discover organisms or features in them that would be of great value to humans.
Here at the Smithsonian, we're really working to become a leader in salamander conservation, and a lot of people don't know that they live in a salamander hotspot because these species are so elusive. They spend so much time underground. And so we're working to engage the public and to get people out there helping us with field surveys, swabbing salamanders for disease, and really trying to get people connected to their local environment and aware that they live in such a biodiverse area.
We have about half the class represented out here. This is the 9th grade class, and for the past 2 years we've taken the 9th graders out to Tremont to kind of get them out and give them a chance to bond with each other and also learn a little bit more about the nature that surrounds them. A lot of the flora and fauna that we see around here in the Smokies, these students have in their own backyards, and perhaps they just haven't had the opportunity or the inkling to go out there and immerse themselves, and so we feel as though this is a great program to kind of open up their eyes and have them see what's around them, which is just amazing.
I caught a sandteat ladusky.
I think it really helped to open their eyes to get out there and actually just do the hands-on science research out there and to see the various species that they could come up with and just learn a little bit more about them.
I got a steel salamander, and I found it on some twigs and rocks.
Biggest thing to learn more about salamanders and really get interested is to go out there. I mean, it's pretty fun when you go out there, you lift a few rocks and logs in the stream or in the forest, and there's this salamander. Once you really go out there and start seeing them in the environment, it's hard not to get interested.
My family represents about 9 generations of native Virginians. And salamanders, for me, I think represent a part of that legacy of having grown up in the Appalachian Mountains. I remember my dad taking me into a mountain stream. We went up into the headwaters of this mountain stream, and we were hunting for salamanders. Of course, you know, around those parts they called them sprang lizards. And in those days, they were mostly for fish bait use. That was the idea. So maybe some of my life's work's a little penance for early activities as a boy, you know, fishing for trout. But I remember we went to this one spot, and I remember my dad telling me when we were searching for salamanders how when he was young, there were so many more. And that kind of saddens me, because when I think about growing up in the Appalachian Mountains, salamanders was part of that experience, and you know, hunting for salamanders and seeing them, and that was part of the landscape. That was part of the legacy of growing up in the mountains. And so, you know, I wouldn't want to see that changed. not only from my own experience, but for somebody else.
I didn't know salamanders were as complex as they are. Since this trip, I've appreciated nature like way more. Because like I go outside a lot when I'm at home, and like now I can see that salamanders are in decline. Now like if I go to the river at our house, I'm not just gonna like kick the rocks around and destroy their habitat.
You know, we meet our own needs, but we also have to make space for other living things that we share the world with. And that includes little diminutive critters like salamanders, because they're pretty cool.